Sis, in the next life, take a different path. Lin Wan jolted upright in bed, her chest heaving violently, a metallic taste of blood still lodged in her throat. The cold sensation came from the soft mattress beneath her, not the foul, sticky earth. She looked around in a daze. The familiar beige walls, the clean desk, the faint morning sunlight streaming through the window, and the occasional chirping of birds. So peaceful it felt like an illusion. This was her room. Their home before the apocalypse broke out. She pinched her thigh hard, and a sharp pain shot through her, instantly clearing her chaotic thoughts. Not a dream. She was back. Back to the morning the apocalypse began. Almost at the same moment, a scream filled with equal terror came from the next room, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. It was Lin Wei. Lin Wan's eyes sharpened, and the final image from her past life flashed through her mind like lightning. Lin Wei's face, a mix of jealousy, fear, and madness, as she pushed her toward the zombie horde. She had come back too. Just then, an anomaly appeared in the room without any warning. Two soft yet unmistakable orbs of light, one gold, one red, hovered silently in the center of the room like living fireflies, radiating mysterious waves of energy. Exactly the same as her past life. In her past life, she had been a step too slow. Urged on by Lin Wei, she had yielded the aggressive golden orb and chosen the gentler red one. Only later did she learn that the gold granted a potentially powerful gift for creating fire, while the red contained a pocket dimension. Until her death, she had mistaken it for a simple storage compartment. Grab it. This time I must take the power of fire. Lin Wei muttered from the next room as her footsteps drew closer. Lin Wan's heart tightened, and her body moved faster than her thoughts, almost lunging toward the two orbs of light. The door burst open with a bang, and Lin Wei, clad in pajamas with disheveled hair, charged in. Her eyes were fixed intently on the golden orb, gleaming with a determined, greedy light. Mine! Lin Wei shrieked, her fingers being the first to touch the golden orb. The golden light blazed brilliantly, instantly enveloping Lin Wei, and a scorching surge of air radiated outward from her. Lin Wan just happened to be a step slower, her fingers reluctantly brushing against the red orb of light. With a flash of red, it vanished into her palm, and a warm, white jade pendant quietly appeared in her hand. Lin Wei felt the scorching power surging within her, her face unable to contain her wild joy. She opened her palm, and with a puff, a small flame danced merrily in her hand. She glanced triumphantly at Lin Wan and raised the flame in her hand. See that? This is what it takes to survive the apocalypse, the power to create fire. What did you get? That useless jade pendant. Lin Wan clutched the jade pendant tightly, a faint coolness touching her fingertips. She lowered her head, concealing the trace of cold mockery and understanding that flickered deep in her eyes. A piece of jade. Her voice was calm, with a hint of disappointment. Ha! Lin Wei let out a sneer, her posture arrogant and condescending. I knew it. Without your ability, how could a waste like you survive in the apocalypse? Just wait to be devoured by those monsters. Don't say I didn't warn you. She showed off by letting the flame in her palm leap higher, feeling that surge of power, as if she could already see herself standing at the pinnacle of the apocalypse, revered by thousands. You've had your moment of glory in your past life. This time around, it's my turn. Lin Wei stared at Lin Wan, speaking word by word, her eyes filled with undisguised ambition. Lin Wan did not argue, simply silently feeling the increasingly clear, strange connection emanating from the jade pendant in her palm. That connection seemed to link to a vast and tranquil world. She raised her head, looking at the sky outside the window, still bright but soon to be shrouded in blood-red hues, and let out a soft sigh. Yeah, in the next life, it's time to take a different path. Her path was no longer about charging into battle, no longer about burning herself to light the way for others. Her path lies within this jade pendant. Lin Wei, carrying the smugness of wielding power and disdain for her, hastily packed her things and left the house, clearly off to find her past life teammates, eager to begin her glorious journey. The door slammed shut. The room was left with only Lin Wan, along with the faint, increasingly frantic screams and sounds of chaos drifting in from outside the window. The apocalypse had already begun. Lin Wan didn't hesitate for a moment and immediately locked the door. She opened her palm, where the white jade pendant lay quietly, its warm and smooth touch growing ever clearer. Whether I can survive or not depends on you, she murmured to herself, with no trace of frustration in her eyes over receiving a second-rate item, but instead filled with a sharp, piercing light. She found a needle, pricked her fingertip, and a crimson drop of blood fell onto the jade pendant. The jade pendant trembled and absorbed the drop of blood. The next moment, Lin Wan's vision blurred, and her consciousness entered a pocket dimension hidden inside the jade. Before her lay a patch of black soil about 1/6 of an acre in size, its earth displaying a fertile, glossy sheen. Merely standing beside it, one could sense the vigorous vitality emanating from it. Next to the soil was a spring bubbling with clear water, so transparent that the bottom was visible, emitting a faint white mist while an indescribable freshness filled the air. By the spring stood a gray area that appeared small but felt extremely stable within, presumably that stasis storehouse. Black soil, enchanted spring, time flow. Lin Wan quickly inspected the pocket dimension, matching it against the vague knowledge she had from her past life. Just as I thought. She withdrew from the pocket dimension and rushed to the kitchen without hesitation. All the seeds stored at home, a few potatoes, some ginger and garlic, and even the soil from the few half-dead potted plants on the balcony were all swept into the storage zone in one go. Next came the small hoe, shovel, and bucket from the tool shed, all unopened food and bottled water in the fridge, every medicine in the medical kit, and even the books on the shelves about planting, animal husbandry, and engineering construction. She moved like a gust of wind, calmly and efficiently sweeping up every possible supply in the house. Her movements were astonishingly fast, with no hesitation or dawdling. After finishing all this, she took a deep breath and entered the pocket dimension once again. She picked up the small hoe and marked out a tiny plot on the dark soil, carefully scattering the seeds of lettuce and bok choy, covering them with a thin layer of earth, then drew water from the enchanted spring with a bucket and watered them evenly. After finishing all this, she glanced at the watch on her wrist, still ticking, and noted the time. Then, she cupped a handful of enchanted spring water and drank it. Sweet and refreshing. An indescribable sensation of cool comfort instantly coursed through her limbs and body, as if the fatigue and hidden worries accumulated over the past days had been washed away, leaving her filled with strength. Indeed, it can strengthen the body. A glimmer of joy flashed in Lin Wan's eyes. This was the true foundation for survival in the apocalypse. She waited patiently. Time within the pocket dimension seemed to pass especially quickly. After what felt like an eternity, just as she began to doubt her speculation, tender green sprouts emerged from the freshly sown black soil. It worked. Even with her resolute will, Lin Wan couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Time acceleration, it was real. She no longer lingered. Her consciousness immediately withdrew from the pocket dimension. The outside world was still deteriorating rapidly, and she had to hurry to the safe house she had chosen long ago. The streets were already in utter chaos. Cars collided into each other, billowing black smoke. People screamed and fled in all directions, chased by zombies with stiff movements but surprisingly swift pace. The stench of blood and gunpowder mixed together, sharp and nauseating. Lin Wan drove her high-performance off-road vehicle, her gaze icy cold, turning the wheel with swift precision. She had no intention of saving anyone. After a decade in the apocalypse, her heart had long turned to stone. Her goal was clear: the suburban fringe, that standalone cottage with a sturdy basement and an independent water source. It was a place she had stumbled upon in her past life, easy to defend and secluded enough. Along the way, she passed supermarkets, hardware stores, and bookshops, and whenever the chance arose, she would yank the wheel and charge toward them. Seeds. I'll take all the seeds. Solar panels. And those toolboxes too. Map, and these science books, pack them all up. She was like an efficient shopping machine, sweeping through and quickly stashing any useful supplies into her storage zone. When encountering scattered zombies lunging at her, she either deftly drove around them or simply rammed through, never lingering. Her movements were clean and decisive, forming a stark contrast with the panicked, desperate crowd around her. Fragmented emergency broadcasts came through the radio. Unknown virus. Highly aggressive. Citizens, please stay indoors, lock doors and windows, and await rescue. Lin Wan let out a scoff and turned off the broadcast. Rescue. In her past life, she waited until death and never saw the so-called rescue. When she finally arrived at that seemingly shabby little cabin without incident, the sky was already growing dark. She quickly disposed of the two zombies wandering nearby, unlocked the door with her key, slipped inside, and immediately reinforced all the doors and windows with steel plates and wooden planks she had prepared in advance. After doing all this, she leaned back against the cold door panel and let out a long sigh of relief. Phase 1, Safe Arrival. She couldn't wait to enter the pocket dimension again. The sight before her instantly dispelled her fatigue. The lettuce and bok choy she had planted that morning were now lush and thriving, with tender, plump leaves ready to be harvested. Beside them, the potatoes and ginger she had casually planted had also sprouted sturdy shoots. This growth rate far exceeded her expectations. She picked a few lettuce leaves, rinsed them with enchanted spring water, and put them directly into her mouth. Sweet, crisp. Carrying the fragrance of the soil and the nourishment of the enchanted spring. This was the first day of the apocalypse. While others were still fighting desperately for a piece of moldy bread, she was already eating a fresh vegetable salad she had grown herself. Lin Wan sat by the black soil, slowly savoring this hard-earned peace and harvest, a faint, genuine smile curling at the corners of her mouth. Stay low, farm the land. This path is the right one. Meanwhile, in a large supermarket warehouse district at the other end of the city, Lin Wei was surrounded by 5 or 6 people holding crude weapons, her palm crackling with scorching flames that illuminated her face, marked by a hint of exhaustion, but even more so by excitement. Lin Wei, nicely done. Praised Qin Feng, a tall, burly man who appeared to be the leader. If it weren't for your ability, we'd never have been able to break in. Yeah, Lin Wei, that's amazing. A skinny young man beside her looked on with admiration. Lin Wei basked in the praise, lifting her chin smugly, piece of cake. With me around, I guarantee everyone will eat well and drink well. Her heart swelled with a sense of superiority. See, this is the status that power brings. That foolish sister of hers was probably trembling in some corner by now, or had already turned into a zombie, right? She directed the others, hurry, load all the food and water we can take into the car. Move it. She herself stood at a relatively safe position, only unleashing flames to scorch the zombies when they drew close. The drain of her abilities left her feeling waves of emptiness and hunger, but she endured, maintaining her facade of being a strong one. They had gathered a fair amount of supplies, but this also attracted more zombies. Fighting, hauling, and a tense atmosphere constantly hung over the small team. When night fully fell, they barely managed to find a relatively safe corner to rest. The ration distributed was a small piece of compressed biscuit and half a bottle of water. Lin Wei looked at the dry biscuit in her hand, then at the wary and exhausted faces around her, and for the first time, a faint trace of irritation flickered through her mind. This was a bit different from what she had imagined. It was glorious, sure, but was it more tiring? She shook her head, casting the thought aside. The path of the strong was always fraught with thorns. Once her powers grew stronger, everything would be fine. She clenched her fist, flames flickering at her fingertips, reflecting her ambitious yet subtly uneasy eyes. What she didn't know was that her sister, at that very moment, was sitting in a safe, cozy underground basement, a plate of fresh salad grown with enchanted spring water before her, her storage zone stocked full of supplies, planning what to plant tomorrow. The fates of the two sisters had already diverged onto completely different paths from the moment of their rebirth. One appeared glamorous, yet every step was fraught with peril. The other seemed to be merely scraping by, but had quietly laid the foundations of survival upon the ruins of the apocalypse. A month later, the city had long descended into a living hell, water and electricity cut off, survivors willing to kill for half a moldy loaf of bread. Lin Wan's safe house, however, had become a veritable paradise. In the pocket dimension, the black soil was meticulously organized. Fast-growing leafy greens like lettuce and baby bok choy were harvested in rotation, occupying a small section. Nearby, tomato seedlings were already laden with fruits in a mix of green and red, while cucumber vines climbed over the trellis she had built herself, heavy with produce. Further off, rice and wheat she had tried sowing were thriving, a lush expanse of green. In a corner of the storage area, a few hens she had casually brought into the pocket dimension were pecking at vegetable leaves, and beside them was a nest of fluffy little rabbits, a trophy she had stumbled upon during a scavenging trip a few days earlier. The enchanted spring water not only boosted plant growth but worked wonders on animals too, and these little creatures were growing at an astonishing pace. Using the solar panels she had collected, she managed to power the cabin and simple lighting within the pocket dimension, and even secured a small diesel generator along with a few barrels of fuel as backup. That day, she decided to head out once more, targeting an abandoned library nearby to search for more specialized agricultural and engineering books. She drove the reinforced off-road vehicle cautiously along the battered streets. A month of intensive farming and enchanted spring nourishment had made her physical condition far surpass that of an ordinary person. Her movements were agile, and her five senses were sharp. At an intersection, just as she was about to turn, the sounds of fierce fighting and the familiar crackling of flames reached her ears. Lin Wan frowned and slowed the vehicle. Ahead, Qin Feng's squad was surrounded by more than 20 zombies behind a damaged bus stop. Lin Wei stood at the forefront, flames erupting from her palms, scorching the approaching zombies, but her face was pale and her breathing was rapid. The flames were clearly much weaker than a month ago, her ability was severely depleted. Lin Wei, hang in there. Another one's coming from the right. Qin Feng shouted as he swung his steel pipe and smashed a zombie's head. I know. Stop rushing me. Lin Wei replied irritably, her voice hoarse and weary. She snapped her fingers, and a small fireball flew out, but it only singed a zombie's arm, failing to kill it instantly. Damn it! She muttered under her breath, her steps growing unsteady. Just then, the roar of Lin Wan's off-road vehicle engine caught the attention of both sides. Qin Feng and the others saw the vehicle and were initially wary, but then they caught sight of the figure in the driver's seat and froze. It was Lin Wan, the older sister whom Lin Wei had declared wouldn't survive. She was wearing a clean outdoor jacket, her complexion rosy, her eyes clear and bright, her hands gripping the steering wheel steady and strong. Her overall condition was so good that she didn't seem like someone living in the apocalypse. Lin Wei saw her too. Disbelief flickered in her eyes at first, quickly replaced by an even stronger surge of jealousy and humiliation. "Sis!" she exclaimed, her tone complicated. Lin Wan stopped the car but didn't get out immediately. She merely rolled down the window and looked at them calmly. "Do you need help?" Her voice wasn't loud, yet it strangely cut through the noise of the fight. Qin Feng immediately shouted, "Miss Lin Wan, just help us draw some of them away. We'd be most grateful." Lin Wan nodded, honked the horn, and floored the accelerator. The vehicle roared loudly as it charged toward the flank of the zombie horde, successfully drawing the attention of 7 or 8 zombies. Seizing this opportunity, Qin Feng's team felt the pressure ease significantly and fought hard to take down the remaining zombies. With the battle over, the team members collapsed to the ground in exhaustion, gasping for breath, covered in filth, looking utterly disheveled. Lin Wei leaned on her knees, panting heavily, her ability nearly depleted, her whole body drained of strength. Only Lin Wan, effortlessly parking the car and stepping out, remained spotless from head to toe. The contrast was too stark. The scrawny young man stared at Lin Wan, unable to help swallowing hard. "Lin Wei's sister. You seem to be doing pretty well, huh?" Lin Wei, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, abruptly straightened up and forced a cold laugh. "Doing well? Humph, just lucky enough to find a safe place to hide like a coward. In the apocalypse, without power, you're dead sooner or later." She tried to gather flames to prove herself, but only a few wisps of smoke rose from her palm, making her expression even uglier. Lin Wan ignored her provocation, her gaze sweeping over Qin Feng and the others' cracked lips and weary expressions. She paused, then turned and took something out of the car, in reality, from her pocket dimension. It was a tomato. A plump, bright red tomato, still with its green calyx, exuding a fresh fruity aroma, a fresh tomato. Against the surrounding backdrop of gray, bloodshed, and despair, this tomato was so glaringly red, so unreal. In an instant, everyone's gaze was firmly drawn to it, including Lin Wei's. In the air, only heavy breathing remained, along with greedy, longing, and incredulous stares fixed on the tomato. Lin Wan seemed not to notice their reactions, naturally bringing the tomato to her lips and taking a gentle bite. Crack, the crisp sound of splitting was especially clear in the silence. Abundant juice burst out instantly, and even the tempting flesh could be seen. Everyone subconsciously made a swallowing motion. Lin Wei's eyes were wide open, pointing at Lin Wan, her fingers trembling. "You. Where did you get this?" Her voice was shrill, filled with shock and an incomprehensible jealousy. Her flames, at this very moment, seemed so pale and powerless in front of this incredibly fresh tomato. Lin Wan unhurriedly swallowed the fruit pulp in her mouth before looking up at her, her tone calm and unruffled. "Planted." 2 simple words, yet they exploded like thunder in everyone's ears. Planted. Growing fresh tomatoes in the apocalypse. How is that even possible? Lin Wan said nothing more, turned around, got into the car, and started the engine. Under everyone's stunned gaze, she waved the half-eaten tomato still in her hand, drove off, and left behind a figure that sent shockwaves through Qin Feng's squad, especially Lin Wei, whose hearts were churning like a storm. Lin Wei watched the dust-chasing taillights disappear, then looked down at her own palm, from which not even a spark could emerge. For the first time, she felt a fatal wavering and an unspeakable panic about her choice to be reborn. Lin Wan's taillights had long vanished around the street corner, but that bright red tomato silhouette lingered like a red-hot branding iron, searing into everyone's hearts. Planted. Skinny, the wiry young man, muttered to himself, his eyes glazed over. In this world, someone can actually grow things. And so plump and fresh at that. Another team member licked his cracked lips and rasped, "Boss, she doesn't look like she's starving at all." Qin Feng's brows were tightly furrowed, his gaze shifting back from the direction where Lin Wan had disappeared, landing on Lin Wei, whose face was livid and body trembling slightly. He asked in a low voice, "Lin Wei, your sister, she's just a liar." Lin Wei cut him off abruptly, her voice sharp and piercing, carrying a frantic indignation at being exposed. Who knows where those tomatoes came from? Maybe she got lucky and found them in some cold storage. Farming. Ridiculous. Even the grass outside is dead. She couldn't accept it, absolutely couldn't accept it. How could that sister of hers, whom she regarded as useless and who had stolen her opportunity, possibly be living better than her? She herself, with her powerful ability, was still struggling just to get a bite to eat. What right did Lin Wan have to leisurely grow tomatoes? But Lin Wei, Ho muttered quietly, her complexion, that clean look about her, she doesn't seem like someone who's starving. Shut up. Lin Wei reacted as if she had been stepped on her tail. A small flame suddenly burst from her palm, but quickly fizzled out due to insufficient energy, leaving only a wisp of smoke and even deeper embarrassment. Having supernatural abilities is what really matters. Without me, you'd have been devoured by zombies long ago. Why are you all staring at a lousy tomato? That said, the seed of doubt had already been planted. The atmosphere within the group became somewhat tense. The absolute reliance on Lin Wei's abilities had begun to waver in the face of fresh food, a more tangible and enticing survival resource. Qin Feng took a deep breath, suppressing his doubts and a barely noticeable craving, and stepped forward to mediate. "All right, that's enough. Let's first take stock of the supplies we've gathered and find a place to rest." He glanced at Lin Wei, softening his tone but with an unmistakable resolve. "Lin Wei, your ability consumes too much energy. Next time in battle, be mindful of conserving your strength. We'll take on more of the close-quarters fighting." Lin Wei jerked her head up, staring at Qin Feng in disbelief. Was he questioning her worth? Undermining her position? "Qin Feng. What do you mean by that? Without my ability, could you guys have handled that many zombies? Precisely because of that, you can't afford to collapse." Qin Feng's tone was calm, yet carried the authority of a captain. "What we need is sustained combat power, not a one-time burst. Rest now." He didn't look at her again, turning to direct the others. At that moment, Lin Wei clearly felt that something had shifted. Inside the safe house, Lin Wan had no idea what kind of storm the tomato she casually picked up had sparked. Even if she did, she wouldn't care. She was busy expanding her hidden farm. The hens she had captured earlier had started laying eggs steadily, and the rabbits had bred a small litter. Using the wood and wire mesh she had gathered, she fenced off a simple breeding area in the corner of the pocket dimension. "Eating just vegetables and eggs won't cut it, I need some staple food." She looked at the thriving rice and wheat fields, estimating their maturity time. With the enchanted spring water and time acceleration, the cycle had been greatly shortened. She turned her attention back to the newly scavenged books, small-scale hydropower applications, basic medical manual, and the complete guide to building materials. In the apocalypse, knowledge was another form of food and weaponry. She even tried watering some of the fruit tree saplings she had found with diluted enchanted spring water, watching them come to life, her heart filled with anticipation. A few days later, she ventured out again, this time targeting an abandoned gardening store to search for more varieties of seeds and useful tools. Just as she bent down to pick up a packet of uncontaminated peanut seeds, a deliberately softened footstep sounded behind her. Lin Wan's body instantly tensed. She grabbed the short knife tucked at her waist and spun around sharply. "Easy, Miss Lin Wan." Qin Feng raised both hands, signaling he meant no harm. He was alone, his face weary, but his eyes were sincere. "It's you." Lin Wan did not let her guard down, her tone distant. "Something you need?" Qin Feng looked at the woman before him, who was unnervingly calm. She carried none of the panic or numbness common in the apocalypse, only a quiet, composed air of one in control of her own fate. That demeanor struck him even harder than the tomato. "I apologize for my teammates' rudeness last time." Qin Feng kept his voice respectful. "No need." Lin Wan cut him off. "She and I have long had no connection." "I understand." Qin Feng nodded, hesitated for a moment, but still asked the question that had been lingering in his mind. "Miss Lin Wan, I know this is presumptuous. But what you said last time about planting, was it true? Do you really have a way to plant under the current circumstances?" Lin Wan looked at him without answering immediately. Qin Feng's impression in her past life wasn't bad, at least he adhered to principles and valued the team, unlike Lin Wei, who was selfish and short-sighted. "Captain Qin," she said slowly, neither confirming nor denying, "in the apocalypse, there's more than one way to survive. Fighting and killing is one way, but it's not necessarily the only way, nor the smartest." She glanced meaningfully at the fresh wounds on Qin Feng's body and the exhaustion he could hardly conceal. Qin Feng's heart jolted. He understood the implication behind her words. "Our squad. Things aren't looking too good right now," he said with a bitter smile. "Supplies are running low, and morale is unstable. Lin Wei's ability is strong, but it takes too much out of her, and she—" He paused, trailing off, but the meaning was clear. Lin Wan bent down and tucked the bag of peanut seeds into her backpack, actually placing them into her pocket dimension, speaking calmly, "The path is one's own choice. Captain Qin, just keep your people in line. My affairs are none of your concern." She made it clear she didn't want to dig deeper, nor did she want any more involvement with them. Qin Feng watched her leave with a brisk stride, knowing he wouldn't get more out of her. But he was almost certain that Lin Wan definitely had a stable food source, and possibly even a safe base. If he couldn't help but step forward, lowering his voice, "If our squad wanted to change the way we live, is there any chance?" Lin Wan stopped in her tracks, turning her head as the afterglow of the setting sun outlined her calm profile. "My place doesn't take in trouble," she said, and without lingering, her figure quickly disappeared into the shadows of the abandoned block. Qin Feng stood still, his emotions tangled. He knew that the trouble Lin Wan referred to was mainly his sister, Lin Wei. And at that moment, at their temporary hideout, Lin Wei was clutching a piece of hard, dry bread, replaying in her mind the image of Lin Wan eating a tomato, along with the meaningful look Qin Feng had given her before he left. A panic and rage of being abandoned and outshone wrapped around her heart like poisonous vines. "Lin Wan. What gives you the right?" She gritted her teeth, her nails digging deep into her palms. She had to become stronger. Strong enough that everyone could only look up to her. Strong enough to make Qin Feng regret his doubts today. strong enough to trample that cheater Lin Wan under her feet. Yet she didn't know that the power she craved, the power she sought to flaunt and fight over, was slowly burning away the very foundation of her life. And the path of mere survival her sister walked, which she scorned, was quietly nurturing the ultimate hope of the apocalypse. The north wind scraped across the city like a knife, whipping up snow and debris from the ground. The first winter after the apocalypse arrived with unusual ferocity, temperatures plummeted, and the conditions for survival grew even harsher. The situation for Qin Feng's squad took a sharp turn for the worse. They were trapped in an abandoned office building, with supplies nearly depleted. The few remaining packs of compressed biscuits had to be rationed, and drinking water could only be obtained by melting filthy snow. "Boss, we can't keep going on like this." Ho wrapped himself in a tattered blanket he'd scavenged, his lips turning purple from the cold. "If we don't find food soon, we'll freeze or starve to death before any zombie gets us." Another team member curled up in the corner, coughing incessantly, his face ashen. Qin Feng's expression was grave as he looked at Lin Wei, who sat by the window, her face even paler than the snow outside. "Lin Wei, can your ability still support us for one more supply run?" Lin Wei jerked her head up, her eyes bloodshot, carrying a nearly neurotic sensitivity. "Again me? What about you? You just rely on me, don't you? My ability isn't limitless." She had recently noticed something was clearly wrong with her body. After each use of her ability, it wasn't just exhaustion anymore, there was a weakness and chill that seeped from the very marrow of her bones, as if her life force itself was burning away with the flames. She didn't dare tell anyone, forcing herself to carry on. Qin Feng held his patience. "You're our strongest combatant. Only you can quickly clear the zombies blocking our path. The target this time is the small convenience store across the street. We'll cover you, let's make it quick." Strongest combatant. Lin Wei let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Then why do I get the same amount of food as the rest of you? Why do I give the most but receive the same?" The resentment she had been bottling up finally erupted. "Lin Wei." Qin Feng's tone turned stern. "This team runs on fairness. Your ability drains a lot, but aren't our close combat brothers in danger too? Without their cover, could you safely unleash your ability? Fair?" "Ha!" Lin Wei stood up, her body swaying slightly from agitation and weakness. "I think it's you all who are holding me back. If it weren't for you dead weights, I would have long since." "Long since what?" One team member couldn't help but retort. "Long since lived the high life like your sister. Too bad, she doesn't even acknowledge you." "Shut up." Lin Wei snapped, as if struck on her most painful scar. A ball of flame, noticeably smaller than usual, burst from her palm with a whoosh, and she glared back with fierce eyes. "Enough bickering." Qin Feng barked, suppressing the irritation and disappointment within him. "Lin Wei, this is the last time. For the team, and for yourself. Take down that convenience store, and you get an extra share of the supplies. Maybe one more share." Lin Wei's heart stirred, but she also felt even more chilled. Sure enough, when faced with interests, so-called team camaraderie was this fragile. She gritted her teeth. "Fine. I'll go. But remember what you said." There weren't many zombies at the convenience store entrance, only 5 or 6, and their movements were somewhat stiff in the bitter cold. "Now!" Qin Feng growled, leading the other team members forward to draw their attention. Lin Wei took a deep breath, forcing down the discomfort in her body and focusing her mind. Flames. Burst. The scorching wave of fire she had anticipated never came. Only a few fireballs, barely larger than fists, flew out crookedly, managing to ignite 2 zombies but failing to burn them to death outright. Lin Wei. Put more power into it. Ho shouted anxiously while fending off the zombies. I'm pushing as hard as I can. Lin Wei screamed, veins bulging on her forehead as she desperately squeezed out the last remnants of energy within her. More flames spurted forth, but they seemed to lack momentum, and their temperature was nowhere near what it had been. How could this be? Why was her ability weakening so rapidly? A zombie broke through Qin Feng's defenses, snarling as it lunged toward Lin Wei, who was struggling to concentrate her ability. Watch out! Qin Feng's eyes nearly split with rage, but he was too far to turn back and save her in time. Extreme terror spurred Lin Wei on, and she screamed as she wrung out the last shred of energy from her body. Boom! A burst of flame, fiercer than any before yet tinged with a faint darkness, exploded outward from her, instantly engulfing and scorching the lunging zombie and the 2 that had drawn close. But as the flames died down, Lin Wei collapsed to the ground with a dull thud, her face as pale as gold paper, coughing up blood in great gulps. Her entire being seemed drained of all vitality, and she couldn't even move a finger. Lin Wei. Qin Feng rushed over, his heart sinking at the sight of her. This was clearly a sign of ability overexertion, damaging her very foundation. Cough. Cough. Go. Go now. Lin Wei's eyes were unfocused, her breath faint. The commotion in the convenience store attracted more zombies, closing in from both sides of the street. Boss! There are more and more zombies. We can't hold on. Ho shouted in terror. Qin Feng looked at Lin Wei, who was lying on the ground barely breathing, then at the approaching horde of corpses and his equally exhausted, despairing teammates, a pained and conflicted expression spreading across his face. If they brought Lin Wei along, they would all die. Just then, the steady rumble of a car engine grew closer from afar. A modified off-road vehicle, looking exceptionally sturdy, cut through the snow like a blade, heading straight in this direction. It seemed indifferent to the zombies around it, its purpose clear. It's Lin Wan's car. She came out today to search for a batch of professional medical equipment and books, passing through this area. The car stopped not far from the convenience store. The door opened, and Lin Wan jumped out nimbly. She was wearing a thick winter coat and goggles, her face rosy, her movements full of strength. She glanced at the convenience store surrounded by the zombie horde, and at Lin Wei collapsed on the ground, clearly in bad shape, and furrowed her brow slightly. She had no intention of getting involved, turning to head toward the pharmacy next door. Miss Lin Wan. Qin Feng shouted with all his remaining strength, as if grasping at his last lifeline, save us. For the sake of my having no ill intentions last time. Lin Wan paused mid-step. Lin Wei, collapsed on the ground, also saw her. Upon seeing Lin Wan looking healthy, even better than she had a month ago, a fierce resentment and venom blazed in her eyes, but more than that, there was a desperation on the verge of collapse and a faint glimmer of final hope. Using the last of her strength, she spoke hoarsely, her voice weak yet clear. Sis. That jade pendant. What exactly is it? She finally asked the question that had haunted her for 2 lifetimes, filling her with regret and remorse. Lin Wan stopped in her tracks, turned around, and calmly walked to a spot a few steps away from Lin Wei, looking down at her from above. There was no hatred in her gaze, no vindictiveness, only a serene detachment that saw through everything. She looked at Lin Wei's withered, despairing face and spoke softly, her voice unusually clear amidst the wind and snow. Just a hidden realm where crops can grow. She paused, as if stating the simplest of facts, and from her pocket, actually the pocket dimension, took out a soft white steamed bun wrapped in clean oil paper. She bent down and placed it beside Lin Wei's hand. "You chose a weapon," she said quietly. "I chose a way to keep people alive." With that, she no longer looked at Lin Wei's instantly frozen expression, filled with endless regret and disbelief, and turned to walk toward her own car. The zombies closing in around her seemed to pose no threat at all. She dodged them with ease, even casually taking out two that got in her way. Qin Feng and the others stared blankly as she got into the vehicle and started the engine. Under their despairing gaze, the off-road vehicle cleanly shook off the scattered zombies and sped away into the distance. As it passed by them, the rear window wasn't fully closed, and a gust of cold wind blew through, lifting a corner of the canvas covering the supplies in the back seat. In that instant, Qin Feng, Ho, and every surviving team member saw it clearly. In the back seat, several vibrant green cabbages were piled up, along with bags of plump, clearly freshly harvested grain. It formed a tearing, heart-stopping contrast with the cold, desperate, starving world outside. A way to keep people alive. Lin Wei stared at the receding vehicle, her pupils unfocused, repeating the words under her breath. Then she coughed up blood, her head fell to one side, and the light left her eyes. Her second pursuit of glory had ended as quickly as the first. The wind and snow continued, covering the bloodstains and the corpse, as if trying to bury the most cruel and most truthful answer of this apocalypse. On the snowy night, the basement of the safe house was as warm as spring. Lin Wan sat in the chair, flipping through the newly found practical illustrated guide to surgical operations under the bright LED desk lamp. On the table beside her sat a plate of washed cherry tomatoes and a cup of steaming floral tea. The flowers came from plants she had grown herself in her pocket dimension. Outside the house was hell. Inside was a paradise. Lin Wan felt not the slightest ripple of emotion over Lin Wei's death. From the moment of her rebirth, they had walked different paths, and the ending had long been sealed. What occupied her mind more was the future. The produce in her pocket dimension was growing ever more abundant. Rice and wheat were about to see their first harvest, the warehouse was piled high with all kinds of vegetables, and chickens and rabbits thrived in numbers. The few fruit saplings by the enchanted spring had also begun to sprout branches and spread leaves. Her foundation for survival was already unshakably solid. But a person, after all, is lonely, and some work is simply too inefficient for one person alone. She thought of that girl named Ling. A few days ago, when she went out, she had rescued a skinny little girl from the ruins, a child who, despite her frail frame, desperately protected a few tattered books. The girl's eyes were clear, carrying a stubbornness that had not been fully tainted by the end of the world. She also thought of Qin Feng. In the end, he had not abandoned his teammates to flee alone. With a handful of survivors like Ho, he had fought his way desperately out of the encirclement of the zombie horde. This man had principles, had ability, and he seemed to have understood something. A few days later, a cautious knock sounded at the door of the safe house. Lin Wan looked through the surveillance camera and saw Qin Feng. He looked even more haggard than the last time she saw him, bearing wounds on his body, but his eyes were unusually resolute, with only that skinny guy following behind him. Lin Wan opened the door but did not fully step aside. Qin Feng looked at her, without any pleasantries, and went straight to the point, his voice hoarse yet clear. "Miss Lin Wan, we have nowhere else to go." He paused, then raised his head to look directly into Lin Wan's eyes, as if trying to prove his determination. "We don't want to live the way we used to anymore. We can help you farm, help you with chores, keep watch at night, we can do anything. We only ask for a chance to survive, and a wholesome meal to eat." The skinny man behind him nodded desperately, his eyes filled with longing and pleading, all trace of his former fanatical admiration for Lin Wei's ability gone. Lin Wan's gaze swept over them, and after a moment of silence, she slowly spoke, "In my place, I don't keep idle people, nor do I keep those with ulterior motives." "We understand," Qin Feng immediately assured her. "You set all the rules. We'll obey absolutely. Remember your words." Lin Wan stepped aside, clearing the doorway. "Come in. The first room on the left is the disinfection room. Clean yourselves thoroughly, change into the clean clothes in the wardrobe, and then come out." Stepping into the warm, bright safe house filled with the aroma of food, Qin Feng and Ho almost burst into tears. This place and the outside world were two completely different realms. After settling the two of them in, Lin Wan went out once more and brought back Ling, who had been hiding in the nearby ruins, nearly frozen stiff. Looking at Ling, who was now clean, shy yet curious about books, as well as Qin Feng and Ho, who were exhausted but whose eyes had rekindled with hope, Lin Wan knew that her end-of-the-world haven had welcomed its first residents. 3 months later, the refuge had become a small, functioning community. The walls around the safe house were reinforced and heightened, with even simple early warning devices installed on top. Inside the walls, the once barren open ground had been cultivated. Although the soil outside remained poor, under Lin Wan's occasional watering with diluted enchanted spring water, some cold-resistant potatoes and wild vegetables managed to barely survive, serving as a cover on the surface. The true core remained Lin Wan's pocket dimension. Qin Feng had become the most capable assistant, primarily responsible for security vigilance and venturing out to search for specific supplies. He learned quickly, no longer the captain who only knew how to charge into battle, but a steady guardian. He never asked about the specific source of Lin Wan's food, simply quietly doing his part. Ho was quick and nimble, taking care of the camouflage vegetable patch, inside the walls and various odd jobs. Ling, on the other hand, displayed an astonishing ability to learn. She devoured the books Lin Wan brought back with insatiable hunger, helping to organize and categorize them, becoming a little librarian. Lin Wan stood in the pocket dimension, where golden waves of rice swayed in the breeze on the black soil. She bent down, picked a rosy apple from the tree, and took a crisp bite, the sweet juice filling her mouth. She walked to the edge of the pocket dimension, where a simple sign stood bearing 3 words, Field of Hope. Outside, the wasteland remained dangerous and bleak. Inside the walls, life was orderly, green, and hopeful. From the watchtower, Qin Feng often looked from the thriving garden to the lifeless city beyond it, grateful for the choice that had brought him here. When he turned and saw Lin Wan teaching Ling to identify herbs in the sunlight, Lin Wan met his gaze and nodded. They had chosen a different way to survive, one rooted in soil, knowledge, patience, and mutual responsibility. It offered no glory or effortless power, only a tangible future they could build together. Lin Wan took the last bite of the apple and carefully buried the core in the dark soil nearby. She knew that new seeds would eventually break through the ground, grow, and flourish once more. The apocalypse had not ended, but Lin Wan had built a future worth defending.